Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham. Natalie's behind the scenes today, but she says hi to you with a program that looks at Israel. We look at the news, and in the news, as we come into the studio, obviously, the news may be a bit out of date by the time you see it, but this is the news as we come in. It says, New York Jewish community rocked by anti-Semitic attack. That's in the Jerusalem Post. And then in Haaretz, it's got 5 stabbed in New York attack on rabbi's home. And it's the Jerusalem Post says that 5 Orthodox Jews were stabbed in Monsey during a Hanukkah party. President Trump says, eradicate evil scourge of anti-Semitism. The attacker is being charged with 5 counts of attempted murder for entering Rabbi Chaim Rothenberg's home, synagogue known as Rabbi Rothenberg's Shul, located in the Forshey neighborhood in Monsey, and pulling out a machete which he used to stab people. American Jews were coming to terms with the 9th attack in New York in 1 week. In Haaretz, it says 5 stabbed in New York, attack on rabbi's home during Hanukkah celebration. An attacker stabbed 5 people Saturday evening at the home of an ultra-Orthodox rabbi during a Hanukkah celebration in Monsey, New York, in what Governor Cuomo said was a case of domestic terrorism. The 5 victims were taken to hospital for treatment. 1 is still in a very, very serious condition. And today in the studio to talk about the scourge of modern anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, and a very special book which you're going to want to get hold of, is Ilan Greenfield. Thank you so much, Ilan, for coming in.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you giving us your time and coming across to speak to us today. Ilan Greenfield was born in Israel. He studied in Tel Aviv and joined the Israeli army for 3 years as a medic in the paratroopers. He's following his military service. He studied at Fullerton College in California and became a Zionist activist on campus, and was a founder of Telem, which encouraged Jews to make Aliyah. He returned to Israel in 1982 and joined the family publishing company Gefen Publishing. He's now the CEO and has been featured on CNN, ILTV News, as well as in Haaretz and Israel National News. Now, you've brought in today into the studio a very special book. We've been talking about anti-Semitism. We're going to talk about the Holocaust now. So tell us about the book, and then I'll ask why you wanted to publish it.
The book is called And Every Single One Was Someone. The book is a very unique book, and as a publisher now for 39 years, we get presented with many, many manuscripts. And someone brought this book to my attention. It was in a different format, but it was very similar to what it is. And he told me, look, I've been showing it around for years. No one knows what to do with it. And someone told me that you will know what to do with it. I opened the book, and the book has page after page, 1 word in it, the word Jew. It has 4,800 times the word Jew on every single page. And the total number of the times the word Jew is written there is 6 million times, representing the 6 million Jews that were murdered by the Germans, by the European people during World War II, during the Holocaust.
I'm just going to ask if we can pick it up and have a look at it. Absolutely.
This is the book.
Right.
And the book is covered with a talit-like cover. It does not have anything printed on the book itself on the cover. And when you open it up, you basically have the title, which is called And Every Single One Was Someone. The book, every copy is numbered 1 out of 6 million. And every book can be dedicated in memory or in honor of someone. So for instance, the book that I have in my office is dedicated to my mother, who was a Holocaust survivor, who was taken to Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia. Afterwards, she was taken to Auschwitz. From Auschwitz, towards the end of the war, they were sent to Hamburg for some labor work. And from there, she was on the death march to Bergen-Belsen, where she was liberated on April 15th, 1945. Then, every page has the word Jew. So it's very small, you can't see it. But you can imagine that if you look at this and you're sitting in a lecture hall, and there are 200 people in the lecture hall, so this is how many times the word Jew is 200 times. So you can imagine how many lecture halls of Jews were murdered, and it's just mind-boggling. And in my mind, this is the most important tool to try and convey the message and the quantity of what this number means. Because when we hear of a car accident, or what you just said now, that a person was stabbed in New York City, we can put a face to that event and we can relate to it very well. The other event, 5 people were murdered. So again, we hear 5 people, we know their names, we can relate to that. When there's a tsunami of 10,000 people dead, it's almost non-existent to us. Meaning we feel sorry for them, but we cannot relate to it. Nevertheless, when you talk about 6 million, most of us can't fathom that number. It's so inconceivable that it's unbelievable. But we have to remember, every one of those 6 million was a human being, was a person, and they were murdered for one reason. They were Jewish. And I think that it's very important. In my mind, this is a book that should almost be in every house, of a Jew, of a Christian, of anybody. Because these things, if you don't teach them, if you don't teach the history, it may repeat itself. If you look what happened in Syria, over 500,000 people were murdered. If you look in other places around the world. So this is not a Jewish thing. It's true the Holocaust was against the Jews, but we think that it should be prevented. There's no right for any person, for any army, for any government to go and murder hundreds of thousands or millions of people.
And these were civilians. They weren't involved in any military activity. They were civilians.
Their only crime was that they were Jewish. Either their grandfather was Jewish, their grandmother was Jewish, the parents were Jewish, or they were Jewish. That was the only crime, and that was the identity of them. And I think that we have to really think of what's happening around the world. And to just go and pick a religion, a race, and murder people is totally evil, and it's the wrong thing. But again, if we do not teach this, if people will deny the Holocaust, if people will say it didn't exist, well, it wasn't really 6 million, it was only 2 million, we will lose the credibility of what we've tried to build since then, that it should never happen again. Not to Jews, not to Christians, not to Muslims, not to Irishmen, not to anybody. There's no right for anybody to take the lives of hundreds of thousands or millions of people. Actually, there's no right of anybody to take, just because they want to, the life of anybody else. Meaning murder is murder is murder. And one of the terms that I think is misused, many times people say X amount of people were killed. I think there's a very big difference when someone is killed and someone is murdered. The 6 million Jews were murdered. They did not get killed by a car hitting them. Someone had planned to kill them. Someone had planned to end their lives, and he committed murder. So I think that's something that we really have to acknowledge, because when you talk, for instance, about terrorist attacks or anti-Semitic attacks, so people say, well, a 50-year-old Jewish man was killed on the street. What do you mean he was killed? No, he was not killed. It wasn't that a car went by and by mistake hit him. Mm-hmm. That happens. It's terrible. It's sad. People lose their lives. But that's not murder. Mm-hmm. Here, a person went and took a machete and decided that he is going to murder as many Jews as he can because they are Jewish. Mm-hmm. And that's murder. And in our Bible, and I think in everybody's Bible, it says, "Thou shalt not murder." And I think it's very important that we teach that and we continue conveying that message, and it will make a better world for us.
Now, the book itself has a talit on the cover. Is there a reason why the prayer shawl is on the cover?
Well, the book, it really represents two things. Number one, it represents the talit, the Jewish talit, the Jewish shawl that we wear when we go to services and we go to pray. But it also represents the clothes that the inmates were wearing, the striped clothes. So it kind of brings both aspects together. The way that the Germans, the Europeans, the Nazis tried to humiliate the Jews and have them lose all their identity. Right. So they all wore exactly the same garment, and they were really no one. And on the other hand, the Jewish tradition of the shawl.
Because one of the things I was thinking about, I don't know I think it's fairly common, is that when they do a funeral and the burial, they very often use the prayer shawl for the
That's true.
for the deceased.
That's true. In Jewish
And
tradition,
I wondered if it was connected to that because it was about a memorial for the.
it's a very interesting point. But in art, usually what you as a viewer see is what it is. What the artist wanted you to see is not always the
Okay.
same. And I think it's a very fine point. I never really put that together, but it's true. It also connects to that.
Now, I know that the book is having an impact, and maybe you can tell us a bit about who you've presented the book to and what the reaction has been.
Okay, I'll start by saying, so when they came to me with the book, after 2 minutes I saw it and I said, I must publish that book. And my partner, Michael Fischberger, looked at me and he said, I don't understand, what are you going to do with this book? Who's going to buy it? And I told him, look, Michael, business is business. Sometimes there are things that are more important than money. We are going to publish this book. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but I guarantee you we'll do something very unique with it.
So it was a bit of a risk, really, you took on.
It was definitely a risk, but I was taught, I think, in a very fine home, that sometimes there are things that are beyond money, beyond financials. When you see something that you have to do, when you see something that is the right thing to do, you go and do it. It started from my father leaving the United States, volunteering and bringing Holocaust survivors from Europe to Palestine. He didn't get money for it, he was a volunteer, and he did the right thing. And when his mother asked him, where are you going? He says, I'm going to do what's good for the Jews. So I think that when you see the right thing to do, you just have to go and do it. And we sat down, a few people in the office, the staff, and we brought the concept to where it is. And when we put the book out and I went to my printer to print it, he told me, why do you want to waste so much paper? And my answer to him was, look, you're a printer and I'm a publisher. If you want the job, print the book. If you don't want the job, you don't have to print it. I'll find another printer. But let me know. So we printed 500 because we really did not know what would happen with the book.
Is that because there's like a minimum you have to print, or?
It was the maximum we wanted to take a risk with.
Right.
Because again, we were afraid. We did not know if anybody would want to buy the book. And when we got the book back in our hands, I knew that this is probably one of the most important books I have ever published and I will ever publish. And then we started showing it to people. And a week later, I came to the printer and I said, I need to print 2,000 more. And he says, I don't understand. And I said, we're going on a deal. We're launching a special program that teachers who teach World War II in the United States are going to get this book. Jewish teachers, non-Jewish teachers, teachers who teach World War II and the Holocaust. Because this is the only tool that you can show and explain what this immense number is. And then we sent out the book for reviews, and we didn't know who would review it. And on Sunday morning, on January 26, I think it was, which is my birthday, 5 years ago, a friend of mine from Philadelphia called me up and said, Ilan, did you see? And I said, did I see what? It was 6 o'clock in the morning his time. He said, Ilan, your book is in the New York Times front page article.
Wow.
Half of the page is on your book. How did you do this? And I was shocked because, as for a publisher to reach the front page of the New York Times is like a highlight of one's career. And I wasn't, he said, Ilan, I'm buying 50 copies and I'm overnighting them to you right away because you have to see this. And then I started getting phone calls from all over the world. People started telling me, did you see, did you hear? And I said, okay, we did something right. The next morning I went to the Jerusalem Post for an interview about something totally different. But I brought the book along with me. And then they said, listen, we want to do an article and an interview about the book. And I said, okay. I went back to my office and they tried calling me and I couldn't pick up the phone because my father had just called me and told me my mother passed away. So my mother passed away on January 27th, which is the International Holocaust Day. She's a Holocaust survivor. And I just got this amazing article in the book that I didn't know what I would do with, but apparently there's something up there. I don't know if you want to call it God, if you want to call it Beshert, if you want to call it luck, coincidence, whatever anybody wants to call it. But something came there, and my father told me, you see, Ilan, this is the gift that your mother gave you as she's leaving this world. And I think in the end, when I look at it, I say, wow, this is really amazing, because a book that I did not know what it would do, and I did not know it would do well, and I didn't know it would make any influence, any effect, suddenly really went all over the world. Millions of people saw it. Millions of people have heard about it. The next week, we sold over 1,000 copies on Amazon. And it was really incredible. After that, I started thinking of what else can we do with the book. And when Vice President Mike Pence was in Israel, again, I don't know why, I was invited for a dinner at the King David, me and my wife. And I told my wife, look, we should go. You know, Vice President is coming. And she said, who invited us? I said, I have no clue. Some guy sent me an invitation. I don't know who he is. We went there. People were talking. Everybody tried to talk to him. And I went up to him and I said, excuse me, sir, can I show you a book that I have? And, you know, the guards are around. They try to push you around. And he said, sure, I want to look at it. And suddenly it was his wife, my wife, Mr. Pence, and myself. And he looks at the book, and I told him the story, and he was at awe. And he told me, now I understand why I do what I do. And I think that from that point, you know, when you publish, and I think we publish amazing books, but suddenly you get that recognition from someone who's not just a normal person. He's someone that, number one, I think is a believing person. He has a very strong, a very prominent position in the world. And you say, maybe this book will have some effect on something much bigger than I could ever do, because who am I? I'm a small publisher. And then a few months ago, I was in Las Vegas. There was a dinner with Ambassador Nikki Haley, former Ambassador Nikki Haley to the UN. And again, I went with one of our authors for a speaking tour. I was invited. We went in. I saw Ambassador Haley, and, you know, again, everybody goes around, and I said, excuse me, Ambassador, can I show you a book for 1 minute? And they said, look, you don't have any time. We have to go for the lecture. And I said, just 1 minute. And she saw the book, and she says, that's not a small book. And I opened up the book, and I showed it to her. And she said to the people, give me 2 minutes, please. And they were all under pressure trying to move to the next room because she was the main speaker. And she said, give me 2 minutes. And I showed her the book, and by the expression you see of the photo where she's seeing the book, she is like, she's shocked. And she said, I will take this book and I'll have it with me forever. And I think, as I've seen, and again, I can go on with many, many other important people all over the world. I go to conferences, I have people who come to the table, look at the book, and they tell me, wow. They look at the book and they say, look, this is the only book that mentions my uncle who was murdered in the Holocaust. And when they tell that, when I tell you the story now, I have shivers. Because while it's very impersonal, it's the only book, so to speak, that mentions everybody. And the reason we had the page here that you can dedicate it to people is because we feel that young kids who don't know a lot about the Holocaust, what they can do, they can take this book and they can find one person, whether it's a family member, whether it's just anybody they heard of, it could be Elie Wiesel, could be anybody. They put their name, that person's name in, and then they do research about that person. And now this book of no names, of, I would say, an anonymous book, becomes a very, very strong attachment and a personal attachment for them to the people who were murdered or who survived the Holocaust. And I think once you have that, it's meaningful. So the book is in my house, in my living room table. And I don't look at it every day. But every so often I look at it, and suddenly I say, wow, we really, number one, have to appreciate what the state of Israel has for us now. Because thank God, we have a Jewish state, we have a homeland for the Jews after all that happened to Jews. And number two, I appreciate what I have as a human being, as a person, that thank God I did not go through that. And again, I come from a place where my mother went through that for 4 years in the camps, and it was not easy. You know, I'm sure it wasn't easy. I'm sure she suffered throughout her life. But thank God she was able to make a decent life of herself, for her family. She had 3 kids, 10 grandchildren, you know, so she has succeeded to get out of it in a certain way, although it was always there. It was always on the background, and we always heard of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I was touched by was that the Holocaust didn't just the 6 million who were murdered, but there was also the people who survived, had all the post-traumatic stress for the rest of their lives, maybe injuries or whatever. They suffered as well. So the Holocaust was much bigger than
Absolutely.
6 million. It just came to me when I was doing the research.
Absolutely. And if we think of one step further, every one of those people who was murdered in the Holocaust, had he or she formed a family and had 3 kids and 10 grandchildren, wow, the Jewish people could have had another 20 million people today. And I think when we look at what Israel is contributing today to the world, whether it's in high tech, in technology, in medicine, in any one of the fields, I think the world would have been a much better world. Because when you look at what Israel contributes to the world today, it contributes in many fields and many aspects that really improve the lives of people all over the world, regardless of their race, of their origin, and of their religion. You know, when you look at solar heating, when you look at different medical inventions, when you look at ways, you know, how to navigate around the world. And I think it's countless. You can go on and on for hours. There's almost no one in the modern world that does not use Israeli technology in some way or other. And I think that had we had 20 million more Jews in this world, I really do believe it would have been a much, much better world, and a lot more many good things would have taken place.
Now, coming back to the book and who you've given it to, I know the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's Prime Minister as we come in the studio. You never know with the way things are going whether that will change by the time you see the program. But you presented a book to him, and we're going to have a look at a video of the Prime Minister of Israel with this book.
Jew. בספר הזה יש 6 מיליון מילים, שמות. מה כתוב? אתה יכול לקרוא? Jew.
לאנשים היו עושים את המספר בצד הזה. א',
זה, באושוויץ, פעם השנייה שהייתי באושוויץ.
עשו לך המספר.
אמרו שמהיום את לא צריכה השם שלך, רק מספר.
אני חושב שהסיפור שלכם זה הסיפור של המדינה, של העם, של התקומה. אני מבקש שתבואו איתי לישיבת הממשלה, אנחנו נפתח בזה.
Well, that was amazing to see the Prime Minister himself in the Prime Minister's residence with this book, looking at this book.
The Prime Minister, when he received the book, told me that every single day of his life, and certainly every single day as he's in politics and as being a Prime Minister, he thinks of these people who were murdered in the Holocaust, and he thinks that his job is to make sure that this will never happen again. And he promised me that the book will be on his table and that every guest that will come to his room will see it. And as I've seen in the past few years, I've heard from many people who went to his office or to his home and got back to me and told me, you know, it's amazing, I saw your book at the Prime Minister's house. And I said, look, first of all, it's not my book. I'm the publisher. Phil Chernofsky is the one who came up with the idea, and he gets all the credit. What we did, we were able to take that book and make something of it that's presentable to people. And thank God, our Prime Minister and other leading people around the world really think that it's an important book and keep on using it.
Now, one of the shocking things, and we're looking at the Holocaust, we're looking at anti-Semitism, and is this numbering system the Nazis used. For me, is very shocking, where they tattooed on the inmates' arm a number. And
look, unfortunately, the Germans had a method to everything that they did. And they had a method. They wanted to humiliate the Jews so they could not even think of doing anything. And unfortunately, they succeeded. I'll just tell you a very interesting short anecdote. I don't know if every survivor's kids went through this, but my mother had a number on her hand. And until today, I don't remember any digit on that number. I could never, and I've looked at it and I've studied it many times. And when I try to recall the number, it's oblivious. It's not there. And it's on her gravestone that we put it. And every time I go there, I see it. And I have a picture in my camera. And I look at it, and then if you would ask me, I say, I don't remember if there's a 1 or 2 or 3. I don't remember. I think it's something that they succeeded in humiliating the Jews. Thank God most Jews stayed human beings and had a sense of being human beings during the time. But they managed to put them to a point that they couldn't resist as much as they should have resisted, or as much as we would have wanted to resist.
Now, as we come to the end, have you got a final thought on the book itself? It's an amazing book, by the way, and they can get it from you. You're the publisher, Gefen Publishing.
As we go in this modern world, the best place to go is to go onto Amazon and buy it. You can get it anywhere in the world. I really think that it's a book that every person, every human being who cares about this world should have in their library and look at it once every week, once every month, and try and imagine that catastrophe that took place around the world that human beings did to other human beings. They were not crazy, they were not animals. They were human beings, educated, cultured, and they took the lives of 6 million people just because of one thing. They were Jews.
Well, thank you so much, Ilan, for coming in today. Appreciate you giving us your time and being able to be away from Gefen Publishing. If you'd like to email us, we love to receive your emails. You can email us at info@israelfirst.org. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.